Well, welcome to the broadcast. I hope the volume is audible. I hope you can hear it. I hope it's not too loud. Let me know if the volume is not loud enough or if it's too loud, guys, and I will adjust it accordingly. Well, it's good to be here tonight. Another night, another Tuesday night. We're in the month of Elul, and we are officially into the 9th day of the month of Elul, and we are officially in a time of self-accounting. And I have a little book here, Time of Repentance, Teshuvah, taking stock of who we are, where we're at, and how Yahweh is in the field, and how is it more accessible at this time, and He can actually come out with a lot more accessibility than usual, and hear our pleas and our prayers, and help us in our walk as we grow and learn with Him. So, but this book, 60 Days, A Spiritual Guide to the High Holy Days by Simon Jacobson, is a fantastic book to get. It's available at Gold's World of Judaica. It's also obviously available online, and I think it's around $45. It's about 100 and nearly 200 pages, and it takes you through step by step the entire period of time over the not only the month of Elul, but the entire 60 days, covering you've got Tishri covered as well, and obviously inside that time frame you've got Yom Teruah, otherwise known as Rosh Hashanah, and Yom Kippur covered, and it's really good in terms of, if you're anything like me and you're really busy and stuff will slip by you during those high holy day times, and you miss out on reading certain psalms that are normally read, traditionally read, or certain things are done. If you follow this day by day, you're not going to miss anything, because it's beautifully laid out. It's got just a devotional over here. It's got an exercise for the day down the bottom. It's 2 pages basically each day, and there's like a sort of a thought for the day there. Really insightful. This isn't throwaway stuff. This is really deep stuff. This will be stuff that will move you to your very core when you read it. There's events here, and this is usually directs you as to what you should be studying, what you should be reading, what you should be praying over, and things like that here. Very straightforward, not too detailed, not too over the top. And we've got a facts section here, and each page is set up like this, and it's just absolutely fantastic. If you've counted the Omar before, without counting the Omar booklets, it's very similar to that. It's more widespread. It covers a lot more things. I don't think it's any more intense or detailed or difficult than following the 49 steps, but it is just a really good book to get at this time. And I know we're already a week or so in, but I encourage people, if you've got some spare money, to get a hold of one of these books and get it delivered to you ASAP, because it'll just keep you walking over the next two months step by step, and you'll keep your focus. I'm only been a week in, and I'm keeping a diary. One of the things we do in this month, the month of Elul, when the king is in the field, as they say, that's an expression, is that we're doing a lot of self-analysis. And one way you can really cover some good ground and make some forward movement is by just nothing too intense, but document what your day was like. Even at different intervals, you might do it a little bit of the writing down your thoughts and things, maybe before prayer or after prayer at other times. Certainly if you give yourself at least 2 or 3 times a day to sit down to pray, to meditate, either at the beginning, the front end or the back end of that time, you can sit down and just write down how your day has gone. You can be as detailed or as write down as simply as you like, but and you write down each of the days, because you're really being as critical with yourself as you possibly can, not to the point where you go into total despondency, but you're really giving yourself a good thorough analysis. How am I going? How's my walk? How's my relationship with Yahweh? How's my Torah observance? Am I doing as many mitzvot as I can? Am I helping out? Am I being a good person? You know, all these sorts of things. It's really stopping and having a look. How do people perceive you at work? How do people perceive you at home? How do people perceive you out in the shops, family and friends? Is there any way you can improve that? Who have you offended? Who have you upset? Is there any way you can contact them and ask them for forgiveness? Things like that. It's a very reflective time, and it is confronting. I think it's very confronting, and with Yahweh's help, we can each year we can make a little bit more progress, and we can do a little bit more in really repairing and restoring what we once were. Now this is interesting. There's a little devotional here. Now we're going to be looking at the Torah Parsha. I've got a fantastic night organized. We're going to look at a lot of stuff about Moses, Moshe, I like to call him, I like to try and use his Hebrew name. We're going to be looking at Moshe, stuff about him that you have never known about before. This is going to knock your socks off, some of the stuff that I've got here. We're going to read through this week's Torah portion, the majority of it. We're going to go back, we're going to read the last chapter, because as you know, last week, those of you that were with us last week, we didn't complete the entire chapter in looking at it critically and analytically. So don't worry, we're going to be looking very intensely at the Torah portion tonight. Now this is for day 8 of the of Elul, of the 60 days, and this is the little thought of the day. And I've read this before, but it's very interesting. It's really encouraging to read something like this, and this is just an insight from the Jewish sages. Now have a listen to this. Open up for me the eye of a needle, and I'll open for you the most expansive corridors of the great hall. Elohim asks of us only one thing. I don't ask you to change your entire life. I ask only that you open up for me the eye of a needle, dedicate to me one moment, one space, one corner of your life. But this moment, this space, this corner should be only for me. That is so powerful for me, reading that, because it just reminds me that this yoke is easy. It is an easy yoke. This is not rocket science. This is not something that's going to overwhelm you and frustrate you. This is the way that we should be living. This is the way that we should be thinking, and this is the way that that Yahweh intended us to live, is to study, do good deeds, study. There's 3 pillars that hold up the entire world, and one of them is charity, tzedakah, and the other one is the study of Torah, and the doing of mitzvot, of commandments. So that prayer, prayer is the 3rd pillar, and these are the 3 things that keep the world on its axis and keep the world spinning, no matter how out of control things may appear to be when we turn on the news and things like this. So I would like to buy a whole bunch of these, but I need to consult with Bruce and Giordano about our funds and make them available. So maybe the back end of the 60 days, some people can actually go through it but if I just can't recommend this book enough. It'll keep you busy. It'll keep you off the streets, so to speak, and it'll really. It's like reading this book is like Yahweh coming down and actually holding you by the hand during this time, because this is a really critical time in every Israelite's life. This period that we're in now, you can just feel the presence of Yahweh at various times in prayer and in Torah study, if you will sit down and really concentrate. So, as promised, we'll be looking at Sefer Shemot, the book of Numbers, the book of Names, otherwise known as the book of Exodus, and we are going to be focusing on probably the most critical and most well-known, most popular individual of the Torah. He is the author of the Torah itself, and last week we were introduced to him, and we definitely have to go back and have a look at chapter 2 of last week's reading before we can get into this reading. I want to go through and read as much of this week's Parsha, plus, as I said, last week's chapter 2 of last week's, and then I'm going to get into something and give you a little bit of a behind the scenes tonight. You're going to get like a backstage pass to what is going on at the time we're going to be reading about in this week's Torah portion. It's going to be amazing, and the information that we're going to look at is from another amazing book, and it's called Let My Nation Go by Yosef Deutsch. It's a compilation of Talmudic and Midrashic sources that are all compiled together to form a cohesive narrative. Now, what you have to remember when you're reading through the scriptures, when you're reading the Torah, when you're reading the prophets, when you're reading the writings, when you're reading the Nazarene writings, you have to remember that the scriptures aren't written as a play-by-play of every single event. The scriptures are written in a way where things are emphasized, other things are less emphasized. We have individuals that are overly concentrated on, and then the concentration draws away from them and then goes to another individual or subject. And the scriptures themselves, if you sort of start to sort of look back away from the scriptures as you're studying them and looking at how they all fit together and how they actually read as you go through, it is a collection of very, very mystical and mysterious books that just hold so much information, and the more you go, the digger you deep, the more information you get. There's no need to go around and mystify anything in regards to the Torah or scriptures themselves, because they contain enough mystique alone to keep a student absolutely enthralled. Now this book, what it does is it takes the story up at the children of Israel actually going into Egypt, and their patriarchs have just died, as we finished off in Genesis. So it's pretty much from the beginning of Exodus, and we have already had the Israelites go into bondage, go into slavery, and it's beautifully illustrated. I don't know whether you can see that there. That's an illustration of Pharaoh, and he's going in and he's trying to convince the Israelites to get involved in laborious work. And you can see that he's got on his chest there the effigy of a brick, because he went in and he actually baked his own bricks and laid some bricks as an example to actually get the Israelites tricked into becoming involved in this, what ends up becoming the most brutal and hardest labor, to the point of actually killing a lot of those after a period of time who engage in it, the Israelites, that they become this slave nation. And so it really goes into a lot of detail that you don't get from the written Torah, but nonetheless, what you'll find is after you read through this intense, really detailed background of what's going on, and it's all from rabbinic sources. It's not scripture, and it's not what I would say historical documentation. It lies somewhere between the two. I wouldn't be comfortable saying that this is historical information, not because it's inaccurate. I reckon a lot of it is spot on. If you believe that the Jew is an individual who fears Hashem, who fears Yahweh, then a lot of their writings, particularly when it pertains to their faith, they have the fear of Yahweh bearing down upon them. They're not going to lightly exaggerate or take something out of context or outright lie about something. But once you read through this and then you go back and you read the written Torah, it will all of a sudden give you a deeper understanding of what's actually going on in the written Torah. So somebody might say, well, why are we delving into this background information when we should be studying the Torah? By delving into this stuff, by looking at the Midrashic and Talmudic teachings of the rabbis, particularly pertaining to where we are in the Parsha, you are going to get insights. You're going to passages and verses are going to make sense. You'll go, oh, that's why this and this and this, and a lot of this is derived from the oral Torah. That is the Torah that was never set down on any type of parchment, that was transmitted orally from teacher to student, and it forms as the invisible vowel signs over the Hebrew letters, if you like. Again, Bris, we have no problem with the oral Torah. In fact, you cannot truly understand the written Torah without the knowledge of that overlaid. It's almost like the Jew over the manna. Is the oral Torah, and people that reject the oral Torah, people that reject rabbinic Judaism blanketly, they're really off the track. So before we get into it, I just want to welcome Richard and Rhea. I want to welcome Mark. We've got some other viewers who I'm not sure who they are who are with us. You are most welcome. I hope you enjoy the study tonight. Mark says, my mum is online watching the stream. Hello, Mark's mum. How are you? What have we got here? Hi, Mark's mum, from Richard and Ree. Can you tell us the name of the book? It's called 60 Days. Yeah, sorry, somebody's just written. I've got my little chat screen here, so you can write comments here, and where possible, I'll jump in. And so if you've got any questions, type the questions down in the chat window, and I'll do my best to answer them. The book is called 60 Days: A Spiritual Guide to the High Holy Days by Simone Jacobson. He's the author of the bestseller Toward a Meaningful Life, which I have not read. It's orthodox, but it is fabulous. It's absolutely fabulous book. It's very rich. It's rich and it's heavy, but it's not heavy in a burdensome way. You'll read the devotional. You'll go back probably and read the devotional several times if you get the chance. And it'll really spur you on. I've really got to make time today to sit down and have some study time. And this other book is, again, it's called Let My Nation Go by Yosef Duce. I hope I've said his last name right. It's Deutsch is his last name. Yosef is Yosef. And it's a compilation of Talmudic and Midrashic sources. And it's the story of the Exodus of the Jewish nation, it has here. We expect that from Orthodox Jews. They refer to Israel as the collective as Jews, and there's reasons for that, which I might go into if we've got time later on tonight, or if you really want to ask me why. The story of the Exodus of the Jewish nation from Egyptian bondage. So we're going to get into that shortly, but without any further ado, let's have a look at the Parsha. So if you want to open your scriptures to Sefer Shemot, the book of Exodus, I'm using the Chumash, which is an Orthodox Jewish translation, and it has the Hebrew on the facing page there. I'm going to be reading in English, and this book is fabulous. It has a good cross-section of rabbinical commentary attached to it, and that's another book that I recommend all good students have in their library, or out on their desk preferably, for them to be studying. So chapter 2, so we're going to look at chapter 2 of last week's Parsha, and we're going to read straight into this week's Torah Parsha, Triennial Torah Parsha. If you're taking notes, this week's Triennial Torah Parsha is Exodus chapter 3, verses 1 to chapter 4 to verse 13. So that is Exodus 3, verse 1 to Exodus 4 to verse 13. So there you go. So that's the official reading for this week, and that's for the triennial reading, not for the annual reading, which you'll see on most Orthodox Jewish websites. We follow a 3.5 year cycle of following the Torah rather than the annual one. All right, let's get into it. So chapter 2 of Exodus, verse 1. A man went from the house of Levi, Amram, that is Moshe's father, and he took a daughter of Levi, Yocheved, that's Moshe's mother. Verse 2, the woman conceived and gave birth to a son. She saw that he was good. And this was originally Moshe's name. They didn't call him Moshe. Moshe has 10 names, believe it or not. The prophet Moshe has actually 10 names. Yes, you heard me correctly. He has 10 names. And his name that he was first given by his mother was Tuvia, given by his parents because he looked good when he was born, and we're going to get into that. He's good on the inside and he looks good on the outside too. She saw that he was good, and she hid him for 3 months. She hid him for 3 months. Why did she hide him for 3 months? Because he was 3 months premature. He was 3 months premature, and this is very important that we know that Moshe's birth was 3 months early, because it really messed around with the Egyptian sorcerers and the stargazers. They got confused, and because one of the main reasons that they wanted to throw the firstborn, all the male-born babies into the Nile was that Pharaoh had been told by his Egyptian sorcerers that a savior of the nation of Israel was recently born, was born, but they were out by their prophecy by about 3 months, which bought Amram and Yocheved a little bit of time, grace, to get themselves organized. And even though he came out premature, he was born fully circumcised. He was born with a full head of hair, and he had even fingernails on his hands, and he actually physically grew quite quickly as well. I saw that he was good. She hid him for 3 months. Verse 3, she could not hide him any longer, so she took him a wicker basket and smeared it with clay and pitch. She placed the boy into it and placed it among the reeds at the bank of the river. We're talking about the river Nile there. His sister Miriam stationed herself at a distance to know what would be done with him. Verse 5, Pharaoh's daughter went down to bathe by the river. So we have Pharaoh's daughter now going down to the Nile to bathe, and her maidens walked along the river. So maidens kind of moved away from her. She saw the basket among the reeds, and she went and she sent her maidservant, and she took it. She opened it and saw him, the boy, and behold, a youth was crying. She took pity on him and said, "This is one of the Ivri boys, of the Hebrew boys." His sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and summon for you a wet nurse from the Hebrew women who will nurse the boy for you?" The daughter of Pharaoh said, "Go." The girl went and summoned the boy's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this boy and nurse him for me, and I'll give you your pay." I think it was about 2 gold pieces a day. So she was getting paid to bring up her own child. So the woman took the boy and nursed him. The boy grew up, and she brought him to the daughter of Pharaoh, and he was a son to her. She called his name Moshe, or Moses, as she said, "For I drew him from the water." And that's what the name Moshe means, drawn from water. Verse 11, it happened in those days that Moshe grew up and went out to his brethren and observed their burdens. And he saw an Egyptian man striking a Hebrew man of his brethren, and he turned this way and that, and he saw that there was no man. So he struck down the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. Verse 13, he went out the next day, and behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting, and he said to the wicked one, "Why would you strike your fellow?" And he replied, "Who appointed you as dignitary, a ruler, a judge over us?" See, what you've got to remember is Moshe is only 20 years old at this stage. And in Hebrew culture, according to Scripture, nobody could sit as a judge, jury, or executioner until they were released at the age of 30, 33 in a perfect scenario, but the minimum age of 30. Do you propose to murder me as you murdered the Egyptian? Okay, so his secret was out. Moshe's secret was out. Moshe was frightened, and he thought, indeed, the matter is known. Pharaoh heard about this matter and sought to kill Moshe. So Moshe fled from before Pharaoh and settled in the land of Midian. He sat by a well. The minister of Midian had 7 daughters. They came and drew water and filled the troughs to water their father's sheep. The shepherds came and drove them away. Moshe got up and saved them and watered their sheep. Now, it's important to understand that Moshe's daughters were tending the sheep. Moshe's daughters were Jethro's daughters, the Midianite high priest. They were not Moshe's daughters, Jethro. They were tending his sheep, not men. Now, he would have had his own servants, normally who would have been male, to look after the sheep. It was not a regular custom to have women tend flocks of sheep. But what had happened to Jethro was that he had stood down from being a Midianite priest. He didn't want to be a priest anymore, and so he didn't want his the failings of his own faith to be made known. So he's made up some other reason and he stood down. But his peers saw straight through this, and when he stood down, they pretty much formed like a ruling that nobody should give aid or any type of assistance to Jethro. So his whole household was kind of had like a black band on them, sort of thing. And so that's why when finally Moshe comes to Jethro's household, Jethro utilizes him to look after his sheep, because he has a shortage of males in his household, and he's not able to employ anybody in the region, and unless he can pay exorbitantly for food and things, he's pretty much has to be self-sufficient. He's kind of in exile in his own land, if you will. The shepherds came and drove them away. This is Jethro's daughters. Moshe got up and saved them and watered their sheep. They came to Reuel, their father. Now Reuel is Jethro's name. He has about 4 names. He said, how, now the different names are used at different times to emphasize different things. We'll keep going with the narrative though. He said, how could you come so quickly today? This is Jethro speaking, Reuel speaking. An Egyptian man saved us from the shepherds, and he even drew water for us and watered the sheep. Now this was, and so you can sort of see, this would have really shocked Jethro. I was like, somebody's actually helping us? This is unprecedented. Verse 20, he said to his daughters, then where is he? Why did you leave the man? Summon him and let him eat bread. Moshe desired to dwell with the man, and he gave his daughter Zipporah to Moshe. She gave birth to a son, and he named him Gershom. For he said, I have been a stranger in a foreign land. That's Ger as in foreigner or nation. It's where we get the term Gentile from. Verse 23, during those many days it happened that the king of Egypt died. So the Pharaoh that forgot Joseph and his brothers and his father Yaakov, he'd actually died. So there was another upstart ruler of Egypt, just as bad if not worse, now replacing the throne. And the children of Israel groaned because of the work, and they cried out. Their outcry because of the work went up to Elohim. Elohim heard their moaning, and Elohim remembered his covenant with Abraham, with Yitzhak, and with Yaakov. Elohim saw the children of Israel, and Elohim knew. Chapter 3. Moshe was shepherding the sheep of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. He guided the sheep far into the wilderness, and he arrived at the mountain of Elohim toward Horeb. An angel of Yahweh appeared to him in a blaze of fire from amid the bush. He saw, and behold, the bush was burning in the fire, but the bush was not consumed. Moshe thought, I will turn aside now and look at this great sight. Why will the bush not be burned? Yahweh saw that he turned aside to see, and Elohim called out to him from amid the bush and said, Moshe, Moshe, and replied, Here I am. And he said, Do not come closer to here. Remove your shoes from your feet, for the place upon which you stand is Kodesh Eretz. Kodesh Hadam. Excuse me, Eretz is tree. So it's holy ground. Kodesh is holy. And Kodesh, holy. Eretz is tree. Adam is ground. Excuse me. All right, let's go. Verse 6. And he said, I am the Elohim of your father, the father of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. Moshe hid his face, for he was afraid to gaze toward Elohim. Yahweh said, I have indeed seen the affliction of my people that is in Mitzrayim, is in Egypt, and I have heard its outcry because of its taskmasters, for I have known of its sufferings. I shall descend to rescue it from the hand of Egypt, and to bring it up from the land to a good and spacious land, to a land flowing with milk and honey, to a place of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusite. And now behold, the outcry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression with which the Egyptians oppress me. And now go, and I shall dispatch you to Pharaoh, and you shall take my people, the children of Israel, out of Mitzrayim, out of Egypt. Moshe replied to Elohim, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh, and that I should take the children of Israel out of Egypt? So, unbelievably, we see Moshe is actually shrinking back from this command that is being given to him. And he said, For I shall be with you. And this is your sign that I have sent you. When you take the people out of Egypt, you will serve Elohim on this mountain. Moshe said to Elohim, Behold, when I come to the children of Israel and say to them, The Elohim of your forefathers has sent me to you, and they say to me, What is his name? What shall I say to them? And Yahweh answered Moshe, I shall be as I shall be. Hayeshe ye hayeshe. And he said, So shall you say to the children of Israel, I shall be has sent me to you, or I will be who I will be, some translations say. Elohim said further to Moshe, So shall you say to the children of Israel, Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, the Elohim of Abraham, and the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov, has dispatched me to you. This is my name forever. And this is my remembrance from generation to generation. Go and gather the elders of Israel and say to them, Yahweh, the Elohim of your forefathers, has appeared to me, the Elohim of Abraham, Yitzhak, and Yaakov, saying, I have surely remembered you and what is done to you in Egypt. And I have said, I shall bring you up from the affliction of Egypt to the land of the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Amorite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite, to a land flowing with milk and honey. And they will heed your voice. You and the elders of Israel shall come to the king of Egypt and say to him, Yahweh, the Elohim of the Hebrews, happened upon us, and now please let us go on a 3-day journey in the wilderness, and we shall bring offerings to Yahweh, our Elohim. Now, it's interesting, at this point he says it's a 3-day journey. It's a 3-day trip, round trip actually. So he's not actually asking for the children of Israel to actually leave permanently here. But as we'll see, the hardness of Pharaoh's heart pushes the situation to that degree. And it was important that Pharaoh actually say to Moshe, I give you permission for the children of Israel to leave. They couldn't just up and leave like most of the tribe of Ephraim did, who ended up getting slaughtered in the valley of dry bones, which Ezekiel ends up prophesying to. It's interesting because as terrible as the way that the Israelites were being treated in Egypt, this is a lesson to us in our own lives, in our own walks. When we commit to a congregation for any length of time, we begin to get involved. We begin to actually become a part of that body, that group, whoever we're meeting with. And for whatever reason, we feel that it's time to move on. We don't just up and leave. One has to get permission from the pastor, the rabbi, whoever the leader of the congregation is, to leave. You have to go with his blessing. You don't leave a congregation ever without the blessing of the leaders and the elders. It's very important, and we should learn that just from this these few passages here, that even the Israelites never left Egypt until Pharaoh said, "Get out of here." So that's very, very interesting. All right, verse 19. I know that the king of Egypt will not allow you to go except through a strong hand. Verse 20. I shall stretch out my hand, and I shall strike Egypt with my wonders that I shall perform in its midst. And after that, he will send you out. I shall grant this people favor in the eyes of Egypt, so that it will happen that when you go, you will not go empty-handed. Each woman shall request from her neighbor and from the one who lives at her house silver vessels, gold vessels, and garments, and you shall put them on your sons and your daughters, and you shall empty out Egypt. Chapter 4, verse 1, and we're reading to verse 13. Moshe responded and said, but they will not believe me, and they will not heed my voice, for they will say, Yahweh did not appear to you. Yahweh said to him, what is that in your hand? And he said, a staff. And he said, cast it on the ground. And he cast it on the ground, and it became a snake. Moshe fled from it, and Yahweh said to Moshe, stretch out your hand and grasp its tail. He stretched out his hand, and he grasped it tightly, and it became a staff in his palm, so that he should believe that Yahweh, the Elohim of their forefathers, appeared to him, the Elohim of Abraham, the Elohim of Yitzhak, and the Elohim of Yaakov. And Yahweh said further to him, bring your hand to your bosom. And he brought his hand to his bosom. Then he withdrew it, and beheld his hand had zarats, had leprosy, a spiritual form of leprosy, like snow. He said, return your hand to your bosom. And he returned his hand to his bosom, and then he removed it from his bosom, and behold, it reverted to be like his flesh. Verse 8, it shall be that if they do not believe you and do not heed the voice of the first sign, you will believe the voice of the latter sign. And it shall be that if they do not believe even 2 signs, and they do not heed your voice, then you shall take from the water of the river and pour it out on the dry land, and the water that you take from the river will become blood when it is on the dry land. Wow. Moshe said to Yahweh, please, my Adon, I'm not a man of words, not since yesterday, not since the day before yesterday, nor since you first spoke to your servant, for I am heavy of mouth and heavy of speech. Then Yahweh said to him, who makes mouth for a man, and who makes one dumb or deaf, or sighted or blind? Is it not I, Yahweh? So now go, I shall be with your mouth, and teach you what you should say. He replied, please, my Adon, send through whomever you will send. The wrath of Yahweh burned against Moshe, and he said, is there not Aaron, your brother, the Levite? And I know that he will surely speak. Moreover, behold, he is going out to meet you, and when he sees you, he will rejoice in his lev, in his heart. And that's the reading, and I've overshot it by 1 verse, but that's okay. Right, okay, so that's the reading. That's the written Torah of the triennial Parsha for today. So, as I said, the focus here this evening is on the prophet Moshe, and this is his formative years. This is, I've entitled the teaching Moshe Unleashed, because he's literally been unleashed. And so when we see Yocheved set him adrift in the Nile, we often look at that event of him being set adrift in the Nile as, oh, this is so terrible. From a Peshat level, yeah, it's terrible. She's putting him in the basket, putting him in the Nile. But really what's happening is she's unleashing Yahweh's chess move. Like, imagine you're playing chess with the creator of the universe, and you make your move, and he's about to make his move. And you're going, wow, he's just going to probably wipe me out in 4 moves. Well, this is exactly what's happening here when Yocheved cast Moshe in the basket into the waters of the Nile. This was Yahweh's move. Okay, it's like, my turn. Okay, I've heard the cries and the groanings of my people. Now I'm going to make my move. It's my turn now. I have the microphone now, not you, Pharaoh. And what happened is that a descendant of Ephraim, it was a young woman. She was stomping the mud for the bricks in one of the pits. Now, this is one of the rabbinic stories. And what happened was she was about 8 or 9 months pregnant, and the labor that they were putting the Israelites through was just so intense. It was so unbelievably intense. Now think of if you know anything about the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, well, it was exactly like that. They were literally working them until they died, because the idea is they wanted to actually reduce the size of the population of Israel within the host nation, because they'd become too numerous. Their customs and their traditions were so distinct. Their customs and traditions had such a flair about them also too, in that there was an appeal about this nation within this nation. They had an appeal to them that the Egyptians were really jealous of, and it was the glory, it was the Shekinah light that was actually shining through the majority of the nation of Israel that made the Egyptians really jealous. And so this daughter of Ephraim, great granddaughter, but a great granddaughter, I think, of Ephraim, she is treading out the mud, and she's about 8 or 9 months pregnant, and she literally gives birth while she's actually treading out this mud in this pit. And so she gives birth, and the baby actually is born in and just comes straight out of her into the mud and dies, and she can't find the baby, and eventually as they're making the bricks, the baby is actually baked in one of the bricks. And so this is like the last straw. And the rabbinic writings tell of the Archangel Gabriel actually brings the brick with the baby up into the heavenly courts and plonks it before the throne, before Yahweh, and says, "Is it time?" And Yahweh looks at the brick with the baby still with the umbilical cord and everything else attached, and he says, "Yes, it's time." So things got so bleak you couldn't imagine. When you read through this book, and it goes through some of the things that Egypt actually put the Egyptians through, it is on par with Nazi Germany. This is my son Joshua, and he's about to go back up to bed. So let's have a look. Let's have a look here. Now let's backtrack back to where we originally started. You had Amram ben Kayat. Now he was Moshe's father was a very, very righteous man. He was one of the most righteous men in the nation of Israel and Egypt at this time. It was said that he was one of the few Zadoks that never sinned, and we know, according to the Nazarene writings, no man without sin. But if the closest you can get without sinning, this guy. He was very righteous in all his ways, all his thoughts, all his words, everything, deeds, everything. And so he served naturally at the head of the Sanhedrin. And what happened was after Pharaoh's decree came out that all the males would be drowned in the Nile, he was already married to Jochebed, and they had 2 children. They had Miriam and Aaron, and he decided that it would be better to be divorced under this decree, rather than risk having any more children, any of them being boys, and having the souls being called down from the presence of Yahweh into the Zimzum, into the contraction, into this environment, into this world, only to come out and be met and meet death's head on straight away. Hello, sweetheart. That's okay. And so he divorced Jochebed. Now Miriam, their little daughter, she was ropeable. She didn't want this to happen, and she really did a number on her father Amram, because remember that expression, "out of the mouth of babes." Well, this is very much a situation here. Now Miriam is 5 at this time, and she asked for some time to speak with her father, and Amram took her aside, and she said, Father, I protest with what you've done with divorcing mother. Your decree is actually harsher than Pharaoh's decree. It says here, Pharaoh's decree only threatens our male children, but your decree threatens both male and female children. Those who die by Pharaoh's decree will at least come down to this world and have a share in the world to come. But those who are prevented from being born by your decree will never have appeared in the world and will not have gained a share in the world to come. Now that doesn't mean that neshama that don't come down and come through the world, the current world that we see, don't have a place in the world to come. But souls that have actually been tried and tested, tried and true in this environment on earth, there is a greater expanse for them in the world to come. So she's not saying that neshama that never get an opportunity to actually come into the world don't have a place, but there is actually a place that is more, it's a better place, so to speak. And she goes on to say, Pharaoh's decree is only a very serious threat, not certain death. And that's true, because only if they have a male will there be certain death. But your decree guarantees that no children will be born. What's more, I saw in a prophecy that my parents will give birth to a child who will redeem the nation of Israel from the Egyptian bondage. Miriam's words made a deep impression on Amram. He announced in the Sanhedrin that all Israelites should keep their wives and continue to have children, even in these times of dreadful peril. So Amram and Yocheved are immediately remarried. So Amram makes the call to get divorced. Bad call. His 5-year-old daughter Miriam says, "Dad, this is not a good thing. Let the nations do whatever they're going to do, but we shouldn't be made to actually divert us from the course of serving Yahweh, and having children is a commandment. It's a mitzvah." Hello, can I help you? Should we be down here?
No. I have to say hello.
I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. We have my son Joshua here with us. Joshua, would you like to say something before you go upstairs? Because you're willing to go upstairs. Would you like to add anything to the lesson this evening?
I have to say hello.
You want to say hello? Did you want to say anything about Moses?
Yeah.
Do you like him?
No.
You don't like him? Okay, there we go. Hopefully I can change that opinion as you get older.
I like him. I can say hello.
You can say hello.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, I think you're missing Garfield. It's your favourite movie.
Yeah.
Always works. Okay. All right. So, they get remarried. And what usually happens when a couple come back together, something magical happens. Oh, I can't use the word magic, that's bad. That's crazy. It's just an expression. It's like saying have a lucky day. I don't literally mean luck as in... Anyway, on the 7th day of Adar, in the year 2368, 6 months and a day after Amram and Yocheved are married, a child was born to them. Although the child was born 3 months prematurely, the Torah tells us that he looked good, he looked tov, and at his birth, because the entire house was illuminated by his presence. The Shekinah light was literally radiating from Moshe as a child. Amram and Yocheved knew that Pharaoh's stargazers had discovered that the savior of the nation of Israel was about to be born. Moshe, however, was born after 6 months of pregnancy, 3 months before the stargazers expected him to be born. And that's why we read these specifics in the Torah about the 6 months and so on and so forth. Otherwise, we have nothing to go on to go why it was 6 months mentioned, why wasn't it 9 months, and so on. Okay, Moshe's concerned parents had 3 months of relative peace before the hunt for the Israelites' savior would burst forth with all its ferocity. As the 3 months...
Sorry, I'd like to say something when you're done.
Yep.
Yahweh created us because He wanted to make sure that He loves us all and that we have a good life. And He made us because, well, He wanted to make something to keep Him company and to make sure somebody loves Him. Like, just for sure you didn't have anyone in your life and no one loved you.
Yes.
All you had was friends.
Yes.
So Yahweh created us for a reason, to be well loved and to be worshipped.
Wow, that's beautiful. Give me a kiss.
This
Very
is my
good,
daddy.
darling. Very good, sweetheart. Very good. Very good.
What did Joshua say?
That he didn't like Moses. But I think he said he did. I don't know, eventually. Okay. Sorry about that. Let's get into it. She's gorgeous, isn't she? She's 8 today. It's Hannah's birthday today. She's 8. Can't believe it. 8, 8, 8. All right, so 3 months drew to a close. The Egyptian hunt intensified as expected. Pharaoh sent Egyptian women with their children into the Jewish neighborhoods it has here, into the Israelites' home of Goshen, hoping that their cries and mumbles would cause the hidden Israelite children to respond and reveal their hiding places. When they returned empty-handed, Pharaoh called his stargazers and asked them if they had any information. They told him that the child was still alive. Enraged, Pharaoh ordered that no stone be left unturned in all of Egypt until the baby was found. The investigation finally began to bear fruit. Word of Moshe's whereabouts reached the royal palace, and Pharaoh immediately sent his soldiers to seize the child. Jochebed set the child adrift on the river in a specially constructed floating basket. The stargazers would sense that she had done what she had done and report to Pharaoh that the child finally had been thrown into the river. Thinking that his decree had been successful, Pharaoh would relax his vigilance and call off the baby hunt. Now, the decree that was set against Israel of having all their newborn males drowned would have sent such a shockwave through the community. It would have, well, we can see that Amram, his initial reaction was to divorce his wife, and the rabbinic writings say that he was such an influential man, such a righteous man, that all the men, married men of the nation of Israel, also divorced their wives as well, so that they wouldn't have to go through the ordeal of risking having a male child and then having that male child pulled from the arms of the mother and thrown and drowned in the Nile. So what happened is when everybody remarried, everybody got back together, and some people subsequently started to have, when I say some, it was actually quite a few, the sages say that the women up to the implementation of the decree of Pharaoh were giving birth to children like scorpions. It wasn't uncommon to some women actually giving birth in the nation of Israel to 10 babies in one birth, which is really hard to get your head around, but it can happen. So I wouldn't wish it on any woman to give birth to 10 children in one sitting, but they'd have to be small babies, I guess. But I digress. So Jochebed took her son Moshe down to the river, and he set adrift. He set adrift into the Nile. Now Miriam, she was really angry. Here, little 5-year-old Miriam's back, and she's like, Father, what of your prophecy now that that we're going to have a savior? You've dumped into the river. So she is really angry, and so she goes down and she stands at a distance to watch and see that if anything happens to Moshe's basket. Miriam was deeply distressed by the turn of events and the sadness of her parents. Her parents obviously would have been very, very sad. She slipped out of the house and ran to the river to see what would become of her brother. She took up a position a short distance from the river and waited to see what would develop. Miriam did not have long to wait. Her righteous act, so full of kindness and devotion, now listen to this, was rewarded with results after 1/4 of an hour. In the merit of this righteous act, Israelites, the nation of Israel, would wait for Miriam in the desert for 7 days when she was afflicted by Zarats and could not travel. Remember, we read later on when Miriam is an adult, she has a go at Moshe for ignoring his wife, and she is banished from the encampment of Israel. She contracts Zarats, the spiritual leprosy, and the nation of Israel wait for her for a series of 7 days until she's clear of the skin disease brought on by evil speech. In heaven too, a vigil was kept over the floating basket and the luminous child it contained. So the angels looked down upon the suffering and anguish of the future Saviour of the Jewish people and the one who would someday receive the Torah from Yahweh on behalf of his people, and they begged Yahweh to bring the child's ordeal to a merciful end. So it was 1/4 of an hour, and it was all over. Now remember that he was thrown into the river, and this was to signify he was actually thrown into the place of the death of so many children, but he would merge out of that place of death as a victor and as a leader of that nation that was trying to be destroyed. So now we're introduced to Pharaoh's daughter. Now it's not Pharaoh's biological daughter. It's she's also an adopted daughter. She's a princess of royalty in the palace of Pharaoh, and she has 30 or so maidens with her, and she goes down to the river Nile to bathe. Now, why isn't she bathing in the palace? Because this woman had to be quite righteous, and that's why her name, she gets given the name Batya, daughter of Yah, literally daughter of Yah. She wanted to actually bathe in natural body of water and actually be like the Hebrew women. The various rabbinic writings say that she could speak Hebrew, and she knew that there was something unique about the Hebrew nation that lived out at Goshen. All right. It says here that Batya was revolted by the idol worship in the palace and attracted to the purity and holiness of Judaism. By bathing in the river, she felt she could cleanse herself of corruption of the palace. As befit the princess of a great kingdom, she was accompanied by 30 ladies in waiting, all of them from the finest nobility of the land. Batya was all alone when she caught sight of the basket floating among the reeds. She stretched out her hand for it, and a miracle happened. Her arm kept getting longer and longer, drawing ever closer to the basket, which was 126 cubits away. That's 126 feet. Finally, her arm extended all the way to the basket, and she grabbed hold of it. The moment her hand touched the basket, another miracle occurred. Now, I forgot to tell you, just talking about Miriam and the future ordeal that she goes through with Zaratz, with the spiritual leprosy, another aspect of why she was in the natural waters of the Nile was that she had Zaratz herself. And so as soon as she touched the basket, she was instantly healed of the Zaratz. Now, I never said she was a righteous lady. I said she had a zeal for Yahweh's people. And at the moment she touched this basket, although that's all going to change, she's going to be very righteous very soon. She touched this basket, and immediately her Zaratz, her spiritual leprosy, disappeared. So clearly this was no ordinary basket, and Batya trembled as she opened it to see what was inside. To her amazement, it was a young child with a canopy over his head. It was undoubtedly a holy child, because touching this basket had cured her from her leprosy. A brilliant spiritual glow enveloped him because of the Shekinah that hovered over him. He was a beautiful child, fully developed like an adolescent, although he was just a newborn. Now, she's discovered this child, and she intends obviously to save him. Now, the maidens, the ladies in waiting, they kind of see that they see how she's looking at this baby Moshe, and one of them steps up and says, "Your Highness, you cannot do this thing," they protested. "If a king issues a decree and none of his subjects obey it, at least his own children should obey it. What you're doing here goes against your father's decree. Surely you of all people should obey his decrees." At that moment, the angel Gabriel came down and struck all the ladies in waiting until all but one lay dead on the riverbank. Yep. Of the 30 ladies, Gabriel left only one alive, because it was unfitting for a king's daughter to return to the palace unattended. Sorry, I'm just looking at one of the comments here. Yes, magic, it's pagan. So all the ladies in waiting, bam, except one. Got to leave one for you, Batya, so you can walk back with the baby back to Pharaoh's palace. So she found, okay, where are we? Okay. Although Pharaoh's daughter had pulled the child from the river, he did not stop crying. So Moshe's like crying. She found an Egyptian woman who could suckle the child, but he refused to nurse. She searched along the riverside for other Egyptian women who might be able to feed the child, but no matter whom she brought, he would not nurse. Yahweh would not allow the mouth that would someday speak to Yahweh to be nursed by a person who was defiled, lest the Egyptians would say, I nursed the mouth of that which speaks to the Shekinah. Now, Batya's thinking, well, you know what, if I give her to an Egyptian woman that will agree to suckle him anyway, she's probably going to kill him because she'll realize that he's a Hebrew child. So she thinks, well, hey, there's got to be another way. At that moment, Miriam appears. This little 5-year-old girl appears, and she says, would you like me to get you a Jewish nurse for the child? So Miriam runs off to do as Batya has agreed, and goes and gets her mother, none other than her mother, Yocheved. Take this child home and nurse him for me. Batya said to Yocheved, I'll pay you well. You will receive 2 gold coins for each day of your service. So not only did she get a child back, she also was paid, which would have been a massive amount of money at that time, 2 gold coins every day that she brought up her own child. Okay, so because of her act of kindness, this is Batya's act of kindness, Pharaoh's daughter, whose Egyptian name was Tarmus, was accorded the great honor of being named Batya, the daughter of Yahweh. There you go. For 2 years, Yocheved cared for her son in her own home. So for 2 years, she got a boy back. Moshe was 2 years old when he was returned to Batya in Pharaoh's palace. He had grown far taller than the other children his age. Batya now decided to give him a name, which she chose with the help of divine inspiration. She had learned Hebrew from the Jewish women of Egypt, and now she chose to call him Moshe, drawn from water, a name which commemorated the miracle of Moshe's rescue from the water. Moshe actually had 10 other names, but all of his names, Yahweh chose to identify him in the Torah by his name Moshe. And this book has all the 10 other names there. We've looked at one other name, haven't we? And that is Tuvia, which means good. His parents gave him this name because he looked good when he was born. But there are 10 other names there, one other, of course, being Moshe. Yahweh wanted Moshe to be raised in the palace where he would be introduced to Egyptian society and scholarship, and he became accustomed to dealing with important people within Egyptian cultural framework. Batya, with a deep emotional attachment to the child that she had rescued, she showed him off to all the people in the court, and she had them all convinced that he was actually her son, and they believed her. Now, the environment that Moshe is in, now this is a big thing that comes up with a lot of people that are bringing their children up in public schools and even in private schools and Christian schools. There's this feeling of, I want my children not to be brought up in these schools where they teach so much garbage and things like that. And I always say, well, listen, where was Moshe raised? Moshe was raised literally in the heart of darkness. He was raised in the headquarters of the Sitra Achura, the dark forces, that is the palace of Pharaoh. His mother, she was able to have him for about 2 years. She would have probably seen him intermittently, but her contact with him would have slowly dwindled away to nothing by the time he reached the age of 10. And then by the age of 20, we see finally, which we're going to get to tonight, he, out of curiosity, goes back and he wants to reconnect with his family in the land of Goshen. So what do we learn from this? No matter where your children are going to school, at the end of the day, they come back to your home every night. They spend 2 days every week with you, Saturday and Sunday. You are always going to be the principal influencer on your child, whether they go to a good school or a not so good school, whether they go to a Jewish school, wherever they go. At the end of the day, you're going to be the person that sees them in the morning. You're going to be the person that puts them to bed at night. You're going to be the person that feeds them. You're going to be the person that clothes them. You're going to take them on holidays. You're going to show them righteous conduct. They're around you. Normally, they're going to be around at least one of the parents more than they are around teachers or around friends or any other influence. So that's something to always bear in mind, rather than throwing your hands up in the air and basically saying, "Oh no, my children are going to a school and they're being taught, things that I don't really agree with." Where in this story we're reading right now, Moshe is being brought up in the heart of darkness. He's being taught all the scholarship, all the wisdom, all the philosophies, all the magics of Egypt. So the environment was full of idol worship, it was full of sorcery, all sorts of Egyptian abominations that Moshe lost his divine glow when he entered the gate. So he did lose that glow. Yes, Donnie?
I need to do a wee.
Oh, all right. All right. Thanks for letting us know, Josh. So his divine glow did fade during this time. Nevertheless, he never ate of the palace food or drank the palace beverages. An angel would prepare food for him and bring it to him. That's what it says. Moshe moved easily into the new role as a young Egyptian prince. Bacha flooded over him like a doting mother, never allowing him to leave the protection of the palace. Pharaoh also grew to love young Moshe. So Pharaoh would often sort of bounce him on his knee, and Moshe began to, as we've seen with my boy Joshua, sit on his lap and kind of get in his face. And one of the things he would do is he would take off Pharaoh's crown and he would hurtle it to the ground. And so a servant would run and he would go and pick the crown up and put it back on Pharaoh's head, and they would act like nothing happened. Anyway, one day they had a big banquet. Bilam was actually invited. Remember Bilam? We see Bilam come into play a little bit later in the book of Numbers, don't we? And because at this time Bilam's an advisor to Pharaoh, as Jethro is at this time, and as Job, I believe. Could be wrong about Job, but there's quite a few advisors to Pharaoh that have other roles in Scripture that we read about a bit later on. But Bilam's there, and he's a real upstart. You'll see why in a minute. Anyway, so they're all around this banquet table, and everybody's having a jolly time in the royal palace of Pharaoh. Two-year-old Moshe is there bouncing off Pharaoh's knee, playing around, and pulls off Pharaoh's crown. And it was normal for him to pull off Pharaoh's crown, but instead of sort of throwing it on the table or throwing it on the floor or putting it in his mouth or whatever, he put it on. He actually put Pharaoh's crown, took it off Pharaoh's head and put the crown on Pharaoh's head. Sorry, he was 3 at this time, he wasn't 2. Okay. Your Majesty, speaks up Bilam. Pharaoh says, Bilam, you may speak. Your Majesty, if I may be so bold, this innocence fills me with foreboding. Or this incident fills me with foreboding. I have not forgotten your dream about the little lamb who outweighed all of Egypt, its people, its wealth, and its armaments, and I don't think you have either, Your Majesty. Now the little lamb that Pharaoh had, which was in a little bit before we started reading tonight, was a prophetic dream that he had about this lamb that actually weighed more than the entirety of Egypt. You had 2 scales. You had a lamb on one and you had the entirety of Egypt on the other, and the lamb weighed more than the entirety of Egypt. And this was like a prophetic dream that Pharaoh had, which Bilam is obviously, he was meant to be a prophet to the Gentiles, but he ends up being nothing but a wicked sorcerer, and was aware of this, and he's basically saying, look at what he's just done. He's taken off your crown, he's put the crown on his head. Then surely, says Bilam, you have not forgotten its interpretation. A Saviour will be born to the Jewish people, it has here, to the people of Israel, and he will lead them to freedom. And then Bilam says he needs to have his head chopped off right now. Whoa! Head chopped off. 3-year-old, chopping a 3-year-old's head off. Okay. A murmur of assent rippled through the room, and Pharaoh also nodded his head gravely. Oh no, however. So Pharaoh's right. Yeah, he needs to have his head chopped off. A 3-year-old child have his head chopped off. Whoa, okay. But Yahweh. Gabriel appears in a disguise as one of the chief ministers. And he stands up and he says, Pharaoh, may I speak? And Pharaoh says, speak. Your Majesty, it seems to me that we're behaving like people who are afraid of our own shadows. Are we to be reduced to killing innocent children because of our fear? And then he goes on, come, look at this boy, he's only a child. We all know who he is. It's Moshe, he takes off your crown all the time. Are we to kill Pharaoh's own heir because of some wild, baseless accusation? Pretty words, says Bilam. Bilam interjects. But we are not fooled. Ooh, so Bilam's a smart one, is he? Let us bring out a tray of gold and precious stones and metal. Okay, this is Gabriel says, okay, Bilam, if you don't believe me, bring out a tray of precious stones and hot molten metal, right? Among these I will place, hot coals, not molten metal. Among these jewels and other precious stones will have hot coals. Let us see if he is clever enough to tell the difference between the good and the bad. The minister's plan found favor with Pharaoh and his advisors. Slowly Moshe reached for the precious stones, but an angel redirected his hand to the hot coals. He grabbed the coal and brought it to his lips and tongue. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief, and the taut babble of tension burst, and they all went back to their dinner party or whatever. And it's interesting, is you had a child just picked up a hot coal and put it in their mouth. I think the child's probably going to go, ow. Now, why did we have a 3-year-old Moshe still sustain injuries from this, which some of you that I know are listening are aware that he did get his speech impediment from this very incident. Why did he get this injury? Well, if we believe some of these writings, and we shouldn't discount these writings, because these are writings from people that have loved the Torah very much, very, very knowledgeable in the ways of the Torah, and they have the fear of Yahweh on them. So if a righteous guy is going to write something down, I'm not going to discount it straight away. I'm going to go, oh, okay, let's have a look at this. Now, the reason being is when he was on the bank of the River Nile as a newborn infant, like 3 months old, he refused to. Though he refused to drink the milk of the Egyptian nursemaids, he did actually drink a few drops of milk from these Egyptian women, and that's what the commentary says. So it's pretty full on. This child receiving this injury, but what you have to bear in mind is when Moshe gets given his task of getting the Israelites out of Egypt, his speech impediment actually clears up. It actually goes away. He's completely healed, because nowhere in the story as it ensues after he goes into Pharaoh's palace do we see that he ever has a problem with his speech impediment when he's there with Aaron and when the plagues ensue. So there's no problems there. Okay, as Moshe grew older, he enjoyed all the privileges and the honors of a prince in a royal household. He was dressed in the royal purple and wore a crown studded with precious stones. All he beheld was beauty, and he could not turn. All who beheld his beauty, he could not turn their eyes away. So he looked very attractive. He succeeded in all his endeavors, earning the admiration and respect of the entire palace. He also took advantage of his position, learning all the secrets of the wise men, and he developing pious and confidence in dealings with the adversaries with adversaries of the highest level. These skills would prove invaluable in the future when he had to go up against Pharaoh himself without being intimidated. So he was a little bit of a debater. He had that little flair about him to be able to actually, a bit like Benjamin Netanyahu, I guess. When Moshe was 20 years old, a mature, wise, and gracious adult, he felt it was time for him to see his parents and make personal contact with his Jewish heritage. He decided to go to Goshen, where the nation of Israel dwelt. Why do you work so hard, is what he says to one of the Israelites who are working in the field as he nears the land of Goshen. The Jewish laborers responded to his sympathetic interest, and they poured out their hearts to him. So he'd wander around, and if there was particularly a hard like chain gang of Israelites that were being worked very hard, and there were no Egyptian taskmasters in the immediate vicinity, he would ask them, he said, why are you guys working so hard? And they began to tell him about the terrible decrees that Pharaoh had issued against the people of Israel, and how they were oppressed, persecuted, and on the verge of destruction. So you would think, okay, well, he lives in the palace, wouldn't he know all this? But we see today how the media actually twists things, and you can see perhaps how Moshe would not have a real firm grasp on the reality of the situation with the Israelites until he actually physically gets out and actually walks amongst them and see that the hard labor that they're under. Now, the Israelites that do speak with him when he comes down, it's interesting, we're in the time of the king being in the field, and this is very much an occasion of the actual king coming out into the field here. They tell him about the crucial role of Bilam, you know, the sorcerer who was at the dinner table, who later on has the thing with the donkey. He had advised Pharaoh at every step of the way, and how and who had even wanted to have the child Moshe killed for placing Pharaoh's crown on his own head. So Moshe's heart went out to this unfortunate brethren. So he hears all about what happened as a child and what that incident was all about, and his heart really, you know, he feels at home, but it's torn and in anguish by the hard labor that the Israelites are under. He saw heavy loads fit for strong people placed on the shoulders of weak people, loads fit for men on the shoulders of women, loads fit for young on the shoulders of the elderly, and he came into the fields every day to see if he could ease their burden. He wanted to share in the pain and suffering of his flesh and blood. I wish I could carry your burden, he would cry out, I wish I could give my life for you. And saddest of all, when he saw the unattended bodies of the Israelites who were laying in the street, laying in the fields and in the street, who had perished in the fields and the wastelands and in the street, he would give them a decent burial. Wow! So he would come along, any Israelite who had collapsed of exhaustion and died, Moshe would actually bury them, make sure they received a proper burial. Since you have left your palace and gone out to be a brother to the Israelite people, I'll come down and speak with you. Okay. So Yahweh's saying this. Yahweh actually sees that he's burying these dead Israelites. So Yahweh decides, I'm actually going to go down there and I'm going to appear to Moshe. And he says to him, since you have left your palace and gone out to be with your brother to the Israelite people, I'll come down to speak with you. Because of these qualities, he was also considered worthy of being prophet and king of the Israelite people. He really had that heart for his fellow Israelites. Now, there's this fantastic analogy, this quick story that shows you Moshe's heart. There's a story of a very righteous rabbi, and his wife is in the kitchen with her maid, and she's slaving away in the kitchen with the maid, you know, because she's a righteous woman as well. She's not letting just the maid get away with it. And the maid drops this really expensive plate, really expensive antique plate that the rabbi's wife really loves, and it smashes on the ground. And the Rebbitzin, she is furious at the maid. They've got some sort of thing going on. They're not happy with one another. There's a bit of tension there. And she says, you did that on purpose. And the maid says, no, honestly, I didn't do it on purpose. She says, you did that on purpose. You did that on purpose. And she says, no, I didn't do it on purpose. I didn't do it on purpose. And she says, if you think I did it on purpose, then listen, we'll have to take it to the Sanhedrin, to the local judges, and we'll get this sorted out. And the Rebbitzin says, yeah, good, I'll definitely come along to the Sanhedrin, and we'll get this matter sorted out. And then the rabbi, her husband, hears, and he goes, and I'm going to come too. And his wife says, the waitress, the servant girl says, why are you going to come? He says, because you'll need support, that's why. And so that was very much Moshe's type of personality. He was attached to a household that he could see was oppressing another household, which was at the core of his being, which was who was in his DNA. so to speak. So, well, no, not so to speak. It was in his DNA. Okay, so Moshe returns to the palace and he has an audience with Pharaoh. So what happens now is Moshe begins to actually seek audience with Pharaoh to see about reversing these evil decrees against the Israelites. And he says, according to my observations, the slave labor policies are not efficient. If someone needs animals to do field work, he feeds them and takes proper care of them, doesn't he? And Pharaoh says, yes. The animals would wither away and die, and then what would happen? They wouldn't be there to do any work, and your slave force will be diminished, and you'll have no slaves. They are abused by improper workloads, and they are dying like flies. Who will finish the projects? Our own Egyptians. This is Moshe speaking. And then Pharaoh's impressed, and he says, okay, I'm placing you in charge of the project. Do as you see fit. Moshe wasted no time by instituting new policies. Every Jewish laborer or Israelite was now given only as much work as he could reasonably be expected to do. Sometime later, Moshe returned to Pharaoh with another suggestion. He says, Your Majesty, the condition of the Israelites is much improved, he reported, but some serious problems still exist. The slaves work 7 days a week. They never have the opportunity to rest. This is pure folly. No human being or any other living creature, for that matter, can work for any length of time without rest. Working slaves without rest drains their strength without giving them a chance to replenish. This is bad labor policy. Tired slaves produce shoddy work, and after a while they don't even do that. They simply die. Your point is well taken, said Pharaoh. What do you suggest? I suggest you allow them 1 day of rest every week. We should make it the same day every week so that they will have the same semblance or order to the policy. There is no doubt in my mind that this will profit that we will profit from it in the long run. Very well, says Pharaoh. I have full confidence in you. Do what must be done. So Moshe calculated the dates from the Shabbos of the week of creation, and based on these calculations, the chosen day he had considered to be Shabbat. Now what would happen is Moshe would strengthen the faith of the elders by reading to them from the book of Job, and he would gladden the hearts of the common people by helping them study scrolls that discuss the impending redemption. So they would have like a Sabbath service. Now years later, Yahweh gave the Jewish people, Israelites, the mitzvah of Shabbat, and to Moshe's great joy, the day chosen by Yahweh coincided exactly with the day that he had discovered through his calculations when the manna fell later on. Because remember, Yahweh teaches the children of Israel the Shabbat by when the manna falls, and Moshe is rejoiced because it actually coincides with his original calculation when he implemented the Sabbath day of rest to his suffering brothers and sisters in Egypt. Now Moshe's thoughts turned to the future. First among their enemies was Bilam, who had championed the labor decrees and had also attempted to have Moshe killed when he was only 3 years old. Moshe decided to have him executed. Yeah, right on, but obviously that doesn't work. What happens? But before he could put this plan into action, Bilam discovered that he was in danger. He takes his sons, he has 2 sons, and they fled to the protection of King Kukanus of the land of Kush, or Cush. And we see Moshe ends up going in that direction when he flees. He doesn't go straight to the well where he meets Zipporah and Jethro. He goes to the land of Cush first, because what you've got to remember, this is very important, is when he leaves Egypt, he's 20. Now, he doesn't end up leading the children of Israel out of Egypt until he's 80. So there's 60 years largely unaccounted for in the scriptures. You've got 20, and then all of a sudden he comes back when he's 80. We'll get to that. We might get to that. Time's rolling on. I want to finish up in a minute. But there's just so much here, and I can't recommend this book enough. This is, at this time, what we're reading, what we're studying, the Exodus, Let My Nation Go, is a great companion book to what we're studying in the written Torah. Now, so what happens? One day when Moshe is in the field, he sees an Egyptian hitting a Jewish man. The Jew, a man named Dasan, was one of the workers, wasn't a worker, but he was a supervisor. Dasan ran to the princely Moshe for protection from his Egyptian tormentor. "Help me, great Prince," Dasan yelled. "He is trying to kill me. What is happening?" Moshe asked. "Why is that Egyptian hitting you?" Well, do you want to hear why? This Egyptian was attacking this Jewish man. What had happened was, because he was a supervisor, Dasan was an aristocrat among the Israelites in Goshen, and all the aristocrats, they were chosen to be supervisors and superiors over the work gangs of Israel. And so they were the ones that were expected to get up earliest. And when the Egyptian slave master came in and saw Dasan was still asleep, he woke him up and he drags him outside. He sees Dasan's wife, and she is partially disrobed laying in the bed, and she looks quite beautiful. Lust overwhelms him, and he actually tosses Dasan out. Dasan gets his clothes and goes out to his station to report for duty to supervise his working troop. And this Egyptian goes and sleeps, rapes virtually his wife, and she gets pregnant. And so this Egyptian actually now wants to kill Dasan to cover his tracks, so that she can be available to him to marry, because her husband is now dead, similar to King David's situation. Okay, Egyptian taskmasters wake us up at the crack of dawn. Dasan replied, "This morning when he came to my house, he set eyes on my wife and violated her. Now he is trying to cover up his crime. That is why he's trying to kill me." Moshe was shocked and infuriated by this declaration, for although he had grown up among the Egyptians, he was not accustomed to their corruption. With the power of the Ruach HaKodesh, in other words, meaning with the power of discernment given him via the Ruach HaKodesh, he confirmed that the Egyptian had indeed violated Dasan's wife, and that he was indeed trying to kill Dasan. Moshe decided that the Egyptian deserved to die, but he did not reach the decision through anger. So don't ever jump to the conclusion that Moshe killed this guy in like a rage, like something that's just a rush of blood, because what you'll see here is remember, you're allowed to only ever get mad when you're not mad. According to our faith, according to Judaism, according to Nazarene Judaism, according to the faith of Yahweh, whatever you want to call our faith, you are only allowed to be enraged when you're not angry. The righteous anger is only allowed to be brought forth when inwardly you're calm. Let's have a look. First, Moshe reasoned the Egyptian deserved to die for simply hitting a Jew. Okay, that's true. An assault on any Israelite is as a direct assault on Yahweh himself, which technically it's pretty bad. Second, the Egyptian was considered a rodef, one who is trying to kill another person. As such, anyone is permitted to kill him and save his intended victim. So if somebody has an intent to go and kill somebody else, there's no trial or anything, they just want to go and kill somebody, that person has a right to defend themselves. The victim has a right to defend themselves and go out beforehand and show initiative and kill that person first, or somebody else can step in and kill that person if this is definitely what that person is intending to do. Third, the Egyptian had transgressed one of the 7 Noahide laws by violating Dasan's wife, and as such he deserved to die. Still, Moshe was not satisfied whether he is eligible to kill him. What if the Egyptian was destined to have worthy children whose future birth would now be prevented by his death? So Moshe was even thinking, well, what if, like Korah, he had righteous sons? These neshamas might never have had that opportunity to come into the world and have a better place in the world to come if I kill this man. Using his Ruach HaKodesh, it says here, once again Moshe looked into the personal future of the Egyptian and discovered that all his descendants were destined to be wicked people, and not one of them would convert to Judaism. There was no reason to be lenient with him. Having reached his own decision, Moshe now consulted with the angels, who were always in his attendance. They too agreed that the Egyptian deserved to die. With all questions about the sentence of death resolved, Moshe looked around to make sure no one was watching, and then he immediately killed the Egyptian. Although Moshe normally carried no weapons, he needed none. He killed the Egyptian by pronouncing the letters of Yahweh's name. Now, it wouldn't have been Yod He Vav He, it would have probably been the 72-letter name. That's the only name that when we go in and we study the history of the name and look at all the insides and the outsides of it, the way the 72-letter name has the power to animate the golem and so on and so forth. He pronounces the name. The Egyptian is consumed by fire and he dies instantly. Moshe then casts his eyes on the Egyptian's dead body, and then he reduces the Egyptian's dead body to dust. He took the remains of the Egyptian and buried him in the sand amongst the people of Israel in Goshen. Had he buried the remains in the field, he might have been discovered, and the Egyptian's family would have searched for the killer. The Israelite people, however, are compared to sand. Just as sand moves silently from place to place, so would the Israelite people keep Moshe's secret. So there you go. Now this episode begins a turning point in Moshe's life. The act of coming to the rescue of another Jew helped him attain the spiritual growth and level of prophecy he would need to fulfill his destined role as the savior of the Israelite people. So now at this point when Yahweh says, okay, so Moshe's zeal and love for his people is brought on to this level where he will be like Pinhas, Pinhas is a guy that's yet to exist, but you know about him and history is unfolded and he's in the Torah. That same zeal that Pinhas would later display, Yahweh is now pretty much saying, okay, Moshe is now ready. So what happens? It's terrible what happens. Now, Dasan and another man by the name of Aviram, both of them aristocrats, both of them corrupt supervisors within the children of Israel, both of them men given over to evil speech. They have an argument. What is the argument about? Let's have a look. They're related. One of them is the brother-in-law, and the other one is married to the other one's sister, and he wants to divorce her because she was violated by Dasan. His wife was violated by the dead Egyptian. So Avram wants to divorce her. No, Dasan wants to divorce her, and Aviram, being her brother, he's going, no, you can't do that. And they start arguing and they start scuffling and fighting. So Moshe steps in, horrified at the sight of two Israelites fighting, a reaction well suited to a future leader of the people of Israel. And he says, Rasha! He says, wicked man! He cried out, why would you strike your fellow Jew? So they're actually hitting each other. Clearly Moshe was of the opinion that a Jew who merely raises his hand against another Jew is already considered a Rasha, a wicked person. The two brothers-in-law now formed a common front against Moshe, and they say, who made you master or judge over us? Because remember, as I said, he's only 20. You can't be a master or a judge in Israel until you're at least 30. And so Moshe is taken back. All of a sudden now they're both having a go at him. They're like brothers in arms now having a go at him. Moshe is taken aback by this unexpected attack. That's right, one of them pressed on. The man is not suitable to be a judge until the age of 40. It's got the age of 40 here. You are merely 20 years old. You are, and I know you can be a judge of Israel at 30. Probably 40 is the preferred age. You are not an accepted authority among your people. The other added, so they're both having a go at him. This is amazing. Why should we listen to you? Have you been appointed judge over us? Do you know who we are? The first one continued, we are not just nobody. We are aristocrats of our nation. We are not simple people whom you can push around. We are supervisors of simple people, and you have no right to judge us, even if you were a judge. Do you think we don't know who you are? Said the other. You're no son of Bacha. That's Pharaoh's adopted daughter. Who can come here and tell us what to do? You're not an Egyptian prince. You're the son of Yocheved, a Jew like the rest of us. Who do you think you are coming here and telling us what to do? Who do you think you are coming here and telling us what to do? At this very moment, while Moshe was being ridiculed, Yahweh said, the very words they have used to belittle Moshe will bring him greatness. I will give him laws to enforce, and I will judge, and he will judge the people of Israel. So they're basically unloading at Moshe now, saying, who are you? You're not a leader. And so Yahweh's listening to this, and he's going, Well, you know what, guys? You're going to find out very soon that I am actually going to put him in charge of you, and I'm going to give him a level of authority in leadership over this nation that has never happened and will never happen again with any living man on earth. Now, it's interesting to note that Aviram and Dathan, these two guys, Dathan, excuse me, these two are co-conspirators with Korah later on down the track. When we have Korah's rebellion, Dathan and Aviram, these two are actually part of that rebellious uprising. Interesting. Then they go on to say, we know about the Egyptian that you killed. Are you surprised? I know about it. I know you killed him by pronouncing the name. So they know that he's actually said the 72-letter name, which was forbidden. That's the 72-letter name, not the Tetragrammaton. Well, you can't do the same to me since I have committed no crime. I tell you what we plan to do. We plan to tell Pharaoh what you did to the Egyptian yesterday. Okay, so what happens is Pharaoh hears that Moshe can kill somebody by just pronouncing words, saying something. So Dathan comes to him and he says, you know, he's not a... do you know he has the Israelites back? You know, he wants to help us. He doesn't want to hinder us. And Pharaoh goes, you know what? I don't care, because he's so happy with Moshe as he's grown up and everything, and he's proud of him. And then he says, you know, he's not really an Egyptian. He's actually a Hebrew. And Pharaoh goes, I don't care. And he fires off another couple of shots across the bow. And then finally he says, do you know he's the deliverer of Israel? And then Pharaoh says, all right, we'll kill him. So Pharaoh goes, yeah, all right, you have my attention now. Dathan, yep, we'll kill him. And he gives him loads of money and a house. And he sorts Dathan out until Dathan ends up going the same way as Korah. And so what happens is they get Moshe and they get an executioner ready with a sword to cut off Moshe's head. So they capture Moshe, they have him ready there. The executioner is there and he goes to cut off his head. His neck turns to marble, and the executioner tries to sever his head 10 times. And then Gabriel comes down and appears as the executioner, appears as the executioner, and he makes the executioner appear as Moshe while Moshe runs off. And Gabriel then executes Moshe, who's really the executioner. But Pharaoh sees Moshe, the real Moshe, running off, and he cries out to the guards to stop him, but the guards all of a sudden are deaf, and there's a big backstory, there's a big story going on how he escapes. And then Moshe heads to the land of Cush. During that time there was a war between a great and powerful kingdom of Cush and the people of Kedem and Aram. Long story short, Moshe becomes king of one of the nations, fights in a massive war against them, and then after that's all said and done, he gets offered the role of king of one of the nations. He declines, and then he just wanders off, kind of like the guy out of Kung Fu, I guess. And then he's found at the well by Jethro's daughters, and we'll leave it there tonight. But I hope you got something out of this fantastic book, some sort of insights there. If there are any questions, I'm happy to tackle any questions you might have. Now remember, this information that you're getting, it's all from Talmudic and Midrashic sources, and I'm sure you can agree that just some of the stuff I've shared with you tonight, and it's really only less than 10 pages that we've actually gone into, stuff that actually serves as good play-by-play backstory of the written Torah that we're so familiar with, we've become so familiar with over the years. I guarantee that when you go back and read what we read earlier tonight, with what we've had a look at, just this little snapshot of this book, you'll make sense of passages you could never make sense of before, or you were more speculative of before. Now, this book isn't something that if you don't have it, the world's going to end. The Chumash, if you don't have this, the world will end. No. That has all the commentaries, and you can find a lot of the references that I just read out in this cohesive story here, actually referenced in the appropriate verses here. Not all of them, but many of the things I've shared with you in this book, or quite a few of them, I would say. Actually, you'll read about them come up by way of the commentaries by the scribes and the rabbis. So yeah. So thanks very much for joining us tonight. I hope you had a look at I hope you enjoyed looking at what we looked at tonight with Moshe, with how he kind of his formation. Next week we'll look a little bit about how he goes in Jethro's household. We'll look at his encounter with the burning bush. I know the burning bush is covered somewhat in this parsha. We'll have a look at the burning bush, Yah willing, next parsha, and we'll do what we did this parsha, and we'll go back and we'll have a look at the last week's one before we fire off into the one for the present week. So we're going to be we're a bit behind, but that's all right. I'm sure you guys don't mind. Somebody said, I love the blue book. Somebody here has just written a comment, I love the blue book. They love the Chumash. It is a fabulous book, and I recommend everybody get a hold of this book. Okay, so before we finish the lesson tonight, 60 days, a spiritual guide to the holy days. It's not too late, we're only a week in. Go online, get this book, get it sent to you as quickly as possible. And as of nightfall, we're up to day 9. The other book that I read from extensively at the second half of the lesson tonight is Let My Nation Go by Yosef Duce. And it's available at Gold's World of Judaica, and you also can get it online. If you buy it from Gold's, you're looking at $46.50 for this little baby. And there's a sequel to the book called Let My Nation Ascend, which I haven't read, I haven't got it. And of course the ever faithful, the blue book, definitely get a hold of that as well. Thank you very much for joining me tonight with tonight's Eye on the Triannual Torah portion. I really enjoy studying the Word of Yah, and I'm really thankful and I'm very grateful to him for these opportunities to be able to broadcast things from his Word, and I never take it for granted. I might just end with a little bit of a word of prayer. I'm inspired a little bit to pray. So if you'd like to join me in prayer, please do. Heavenly Father, we want to thank you for your Torah. We want to thank you for your Son Yeshua. We want to thank you for just bringing us through so much of the errors and all the misinformation and all the chaos amid the storm of life and the multi-layers of confusion. The people that are joining me on this broadcast and people that are maybe looking at a playback of this, myself, you've for whatever reason you've favoured us and you've allowed us to attune to your whistle, and we thank you so much for awakening us out of our errors and all the confusions of our minds, and we just pray that you allow us to stay on this path and be strong. A few days ago, one of the exercises in the 60 days was, if you met Hashem, it says, in the field, and we know if we meet Yeshua in the field, what would you say? What would you ask Yeshua when you're in the field? And I wrote down this. This is what I asked. If I could meet Yeshua in the field, I would say, help me help myself. Something like that. Help me help myself. And that's, again, Father, I want to reiterate, not only that cry and that plea for me, but for everybody that's watching this broadcast tonight, that you help us help ourselves. And we love you, and we love what you've done, and we just pray you keep us preserved and strengthened in the days ahead, and that we may all meet again next year in Jerusalem. We pray these things in Yeshua's name. Amen. Amen. Thank you, Father. All right. Lala Tov. Go to bed. Time to go to bed. I've got a curfew now. I must be in bed by midnight. Otherwise, I turn into a pumpkin. Thanks again for joining us. Have a really good night. Bye now.